Stand up.
From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, an in-depth discussion of the social impact of purposeful disinformation campaigns and also puberty. And now, the podcast host who can't wait to tell you all about his latest round of puberty, Pete Dominic!
Oh, thank you, Pico. Yes, no one told me, but the latest round of puberty for me is inner ear hair, and it is really something to try to keep up with. Hello, folks. Welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. It is Thursday. If you are listening on Thursday, people don't always listen on the day, but many of you do, and that means tonight I will host a virtual hangout, a Stand Up with Pete Dominic happy hour hangout. That's right. If you are a paid subscriber for as little as $5 a month, and you can always pay more, and many of you are, you will get an email each and every day. And today you should have gotten an email with the show, of course, a shot of vitamin N, and a photograph from a listener of nature. And by the way, I'm running low on vitamin N shots. Some people say, well, I sent you one and you didn't even use it. But I like them to be very relevant, timely. So you can't send me one from last winter. And sometimes when I ask to get pictures, I get a whole bunch of them, and I don't get to all of them. And so there's different reasons. No man-made objects. Get outside. This is my way to motivate you to get outside and send me a picture of whatever you see out there. Bugs
versus everything.
Sets, the moon, whatever you want, send them over. And also in today's email, you'll also get the link to tonight's hangout at 8 Eastern. I hope to see you there. Joining me on the show today, I've got climate reporter from heated.world, Arielle Samuelson joins me for the first time ever. That conversation begins at about 20 minutes in. And after that, I have an awesome talk with Professor Arielle Segall about corruption and a lack of transparency on the court. The latest story is about Neil Gorsuch, and Segall defends him at least a little bit. And if you want to skip ahead to my conversation with Professor Segall, who people absolutely always love, well, not everybody, but most of you do. I mean, not Phil Round. Shout out, call out, Phil Round. That begins at about the 40-minute mark. All right, Arielle Samuelson and Professor Arielle Segall both join me. Great conversations with both of them. But first, I got a few things to share, to play for you. Lots of news yesterday. Of course, the biggest story has to be, at least in my opinion, that advice columnist E. Jean Carroll told the New York jury on Wednesday, she was on the stand, that Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, raped her. Did you hear what I just said? The former president of the United States is on trial for rape. It's a civil trial because she's trying to file suit against defamation, but she says it left her unable to have romantic relationships, shattered her reputation by denying that the attack occurred. Of course, you know about this story, but I think it's worth sharing this 3-minute report from CNN, where Wolf Blitzer has a reporter on the story in New York, and kind of uncomfortable, by the way. Wolf Blitzer says rape right here. It sounds like Norm Macdonald. But this, I think, is a pretty comprehensive report. 3 minutes from CNN, and then we're back for more.
In a New York courtroom today, a grave allegation against Donald Trump was said aloud and under oath. E. Jean Carroll taking the stand in her civil lawsuit against the former president and accusing him of rape. CNN's Paula Reed is just outside the courthouse for us. Paula, tell us more about Carroll's testimony today and the allegations that Trump has repeatedly denied.
Well, Wolf, Carroll has waited decades for this moment. Today, she spoke for the first time in a courtroom under oath, at times speaking through tears, as she recounted an alleged sexual assault by Donald Trump. Writer E. Jean Carroll taking the stand in the second day of her civil battery and defamation case against former President Donald Trump.
Are you looking forward to testifying today?
The first question her attorney asked, why she finally took her case to court. I'm here because Donald Trump raped me, and when I wrote about it, he said it didn't happen. He lied and shattered my reputation, and I'm here to try to get my life back. Carroll alleges Trump raped her in a department store in the 1990s.
It was a fight. I want women to know
that I did not stand there. I did not freeze. I was not paralyzed. It was over very quickly. It was against my will, 100%. And I ran away.
She spent hours Wednesday testifying on the alleged assault, which Trump denies. She told the jury she didn't picture anything about what was about to happen when the pair were shopping in the New York Bergdorf Goodman. Through tears, she said the open dressing room door they entered plagued me for years because I just walked into it, walked in. She told the jury Trump shoved her against the wall, and then the assault began. I always think of why I walked in there to get myself in that situation, but I'm proud to say I did get out. I got my knee up and pushed him back. She's now suing Trump for unspecified monetary damages and to get him to retract this October 2022 social media post, reading in part, "I don't know this woman. This woman is not my type." But in 2019, Trump acknowledged this photo from the 1980s, showing the two chatting.
I have absolutely no idea who she is. There's some picture where we're shaking hands. It looks like at some kind of event.
Trump, who isn't expected to appear at the trial unless called to testify, posted Wednesday calling the case a, quote, made-up scam. The judge in this case reacting strongly to Trump's public statement, telling his lawyer that it opens up the client to a, quote, potential liability. Tomorrow, Carol will face more questions from her own attorneys, and then she will face cross-examination by Trump's lawyers, who have alleged that she completely made up this story for political purposes. And Wolf, even the most experienced defense attorneys, know that cross-examining someone who alleges they have been sexually assaulted is a delicate task.
Yeah, well, there you go from CNN, and this trial's expected to last like 10 days or so, so really very important story. I guess probably not the most important story, but certainly huge consequences there. Probably the most important story from yesterday is that the House Republicans passed a debt limit bill, and it's going nowhere in the Senate. It's dead on arrival, but Republican bill to raise the debt limit and slash government funding passed the House after 11-hour tweaks won over a group of GOP holdouts. The bill serves as House Republicans' opening bid in talks with President Joe Biden later this year over the debt limit and federal budget. The White House called the bill a reckless attempt to extract extreme concessions and said Biden would veto it if it ever reached his desk. But the serious and most important thing about this is the actual human cost that if this bill ever became law, the demands in it would be catastrophic. Karen Dolan over at The Hill writes, President Biden said it well when he called House Speaker Representative Kevin McCarthy's demands to gut the U.S. safety net or force a federal default wacko. Whatever word you use for it, McCarthy and his caucus are holding American families, the full faith and credit of the United States, and the global economy hostage to his demands to slash programs that most of us rely on. She goes on to say that according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, Kevin McCarthy's Limit, Save, and Grow Act, that's their dumb, stupid name for kill the planet, the world economy, and screw poor people, and veterans and teachers and a whole bunch of other important people act. That's what it should be called. Anyway, it demands the following as ransom for the full faith and credit of the United States. It demands leaving many more veterans, families, and elderly people homeless, hungry, and unable to access health care or college, eliminating tens of thousands of teachers and hundreds of thousands of Head Start and child care slots, increasing interest on credit cards, car payments, and mortgages while preventing any student loan relief, scaling back tax incentives for green energy and making it easier for oil and gas companies to pollute, making it easier for rich folks to cheat on their taxes. And this is simply no way to run an economy, she says. Serve our people or be responsible global partner. It's a formula for the opposite. And she finishes the piece by saying, the debt ceiling should be abolished. It has no connection to the real economy, and it's of no use except as a weapon to take the government hostage. McCarthy's faction couldn't care less about the debt ceiling when it comes to unfunded wars, tax cuts for the wealthiest, and a ballooning Pentagon budget. But let it be about doing their job and keeping the rest of us afloat, and they go into full fiscal terrorist mode. That is Karen Dolan writing at the Hill. She's a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. Well, the new guard of Democrats in the House aren't having it. Here is a couple samples of that. Here's the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, at the mic yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, what is the Republican record President Reagan comes into office, and the first thing that he does is massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, and explodes the deficit. President George W. Bush comes into office, 2001, 2003, massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, 2 failed wars, a deep recession, explodes the deficit. President Trump comes into office. First thing he does in 2017, massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. The GOP tax scam. 83% of the benefits going to the wealthiest 1% in America, explodes the deficits. How dare you lecture America about fiscal responsibility when the record shows that Democrats are the party of job creation and reducing deficits, and Republicans are the party of tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, and exploding the deficit. So we're not going to stand here and allow you to lecture us about fiscal responsibility. What this is an effort to try to extract deep, painful cuts on everyday Americans.
All right, Hakeem Jeffries yesterday on the House floor. Let's check in with Alexandria. Has 2 New York City representatives, by the way.
So instead of looking at climate and instead of looking at cuts to health care, we should examine why our colleagues in the Republican Party is so invested in protecting the wealthiest people in this society and would rather attack health care and services for our veterans than repealing tax cuts for yacht owners and private jets. And with that, I yield my time.
All right. Hakeem Jeffries and AOC responding, and that's a big story yesterday. Everybody's talking about that one for sure, and also talking a lot about what's going on in Montana, where Republicans there on Wednesday voted to formally punish a transgender Democratic Party lawmaker who's been silenced in the state house after criticizing her GOP colleagues who support a ban on gender-affirming care for transgender children. Talked a little bit about this with Adam Sank. That conversation got a lot of great feedback, by the way. Thank you very much for all of that. Anyway, in Montana, the chamber voted to bar this state representative. Her name is Zoe Zephyr, and she could not be present on the House floor or in the gallery, a move that comes after Zephyr's silencing led to heated protests at the Capitol on Monday. Zephyr will still be allowed to vote, but only remotely, meaning she cannot debate on the House floor for the rest of the legislative session. Here she is speaking yesterday on the House floor in Montana in her defense. This is powerful stuff.
I have had friends who have taken their lives because of these bills. I have fielded calls from families in Montana, including one family whose trans teenager attempted to take her life while watching a hearing on one of the anti-trans bills. And in that hearing, our caucus pleaded with the Republican chair of the Judiciary Committee to not allow certain testimony, to keep decorum. And we were told a lot of people have a lot of opinions on these things. So when I rose up and said, there is blood on your hands, I was not being hyperbolic. I was speaking to the real consequences of the votes that we as legislators take in this body. And when the speaker asks me to apologize, what he is, on behalf of decorum, what he is really asking me to do is be silent when my community is facing bills that get us killed. He is asking me to be complicit in this legislature's eradication of our community, and I refuse to do so, and I will always refuse to do so.
Very brave. Very, very brave. I should try to get her on the show. Really important story and sad. They're not going to win. They're not going to win this on this issue. They make a lot of noise, and eventually they're going to lose. It's going to take a lot of time, and a lot of pain, and a lot of death, I'm sure. But they'll lose in the end. That's what I think, at least. Okay, well, what else do I have for you? Oh, I've got to also play you this very powerful moment from hearing yesterday in the Senate, where a young woman named Amanda Zarowski, who is suing the state of Texas for being denied an abortion when she prematurely went into labor. She testified before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday and tore into her state senators, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, who weren't in the room. So this young woman and her husband were expecting their first child, who they had named Willow, and she went into labor at the time when pregnancy was still weeks from viability, and there was just no chance for Willow to survive, according to The Intercept back in March. Here she is in her own words yesterday in the Senate.
I wanted to address my senators, Cruz and Cornyn, who neither of whom regrettably are in the room right now, but I would like for them to know that what happened to me, I think most people in this room would agree, was horrific. But it's a direct result of the policies that they support. I nearly died on their watch. And furthermore, as a result of what happened to me, I may have been robbed of the opportunity to have children in the future. And it's because of the policies that they support. What happened to me was horrible, but I am one of many. And quite frankly, I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I have a husband that could take me to the hospital. I don't have other children that I had to worry about finding health care for. I have a job that was understanding, that allowed me to grieve for 3 days as I waited to almost die. What about all of the women that don't have those same opportunities, that don't have access to health care, that don't have health insurance, that don't have a partner? What about them?
All right. Powerful stuff, and a lot of serious stuff here at the end. I think just it's hopeful, it's inspiring, because this is how we win on these issues that are so important and that they are so wrong, and that the vast majority of Americans disagree with them. These horribly stupid culture war issues. Peter Thiel, by the way, the Republican mega donor, has said he's not going to be funding any candidates in 2024. I mean, that's what he says. So he's dark money, but says he's sick of the culture war, even though he contributed probably more to it than almost anybody. Donated like over $1 million to the guy who took away abortion rights. So there's that. And Disney is now suing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, alleging it's a political effort to hurt their business. So these culture war issues are working against the Republican Party and Republican brand. At least that's my analysis. That's my expert analysis of it. What do you think? Tell me tonight at the Hangout what you think. Also want to hear everybody's thoughts on Joe Biden running again. Would like to hear from you on that tonight at 8 p.m. All right, well, that was a lot of heavy, serious stuff. Let's get some laughs at the expense of Tucker Carlson, and brought to you by the writers and the host of The Daily Show this week, Desi Liddick.
Let's kick things off with Tucker Carlson, the world's most unemployed boat shoe. No one's heard from Tucker since his surprise firing on Monday, except the pillow he's been screaming into. And it turns out there may be a good reason for that. Fox News executives reportedly have a dossier of dirt on him. Yeah, to keep him from attacking the network. That's right. They apparently have him saying the most vile things you can imagine. And the way they compiled it, and this is genius, is by turning on his television show and pressing record. Very sneaky, Fox.
All right, good stuff, good stuff. Desi Liddick at The Daily Show. And now it's time to get to my guests. Guests. Coming up, Eric Segall. Great, good 45-minute conversation with him, I think. But first, I had Arielle Samuelson on for the first time. She is a reporter at Heated, which is one of my favorite independent news outlets. They do accountability journalism for the climate crisis, and they do it as good as anybody. I love Emily Atkin and her work at heated.world. So when she told me that she was doing so well and the enterprise was going so well that she was able to hire another reporter, I said, well, we should talk with whoever that person is too. So Emily reached out to me a week ago or so ago and said, Arielle Samuelson has written this great piece on the climate costs of Los Angeles' police helicopters, and you should talk to her about it. So I reached out and contacted Arielle, had her on for the first time, and she was really great, super smart reporter who, before this, worked at Atlantic Media. Before that, she worked at NASA's Propulsion Lab. She's got a master's degree in journalism. She's on Twitter at Arielle Samuelson, climate reporter for Heated, heated.world. I'll do whatever I can to promote the work that Emily and Arielle are doing, and I'll certainly talk to them about all their original reporting and anything else. Really excited to have her joining me for the first time. I think you're really going to like her as much as I did. I learned a ton from this. Follow her, let her know you heard her, and go support heated.world. Here we go for the first time with Arielle Samuelson. Very excited to be talking to you. You come highly recommended by Emily, of course.
Thank you. Excited to talk to you, too.
Before we get into the piece that we're going to talk about and your work at Heated, let's just talk about your past, because it's pretty cool. It looks like, from what I can see on the internet, you got your undergraduate degree at the St. Louis, Washington University in St. Louis, great school. Then you got your graduate degree, master's at USC in journalism. Is that right?
Yes.
And then your first gig out of there was NASA. Is that right?
Yes. So I got an internship at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, which is in Pasadena. And if you're a fan of the Mars rovers, they build them there. I did not build them. I got to write about it, though. So that was my first job out of grad school, and I stayed for a while because it's really fun.
When you see, let me just ask one ridiculous question. When you see hipsters and others wearing NASA T-shirts, what is your like work there? Like, what is would it be like you would poser to wear NASA gear for you at this point as an alumni, or even when you were there?
No. So I would think how great it is that everyone was excited, but I would also have a slightly salty thought because we had to buy our own T-shirts from the JPL store, which is much more expensive than the Target version. So I still have my JPL swag, but I would think, well, I have the NASA printed shirt.
Well, that, and you had an ID for 4 years. What an amazing experience that must have been. Could you just tell me a little bit more, though? You worked at the NASA Propulsion Lab. What was your, you mentioned the Mars rover, but what was your work for those years?
So I started out on two sections. I worked on the NASA's exoplanet exploration program, which is the search for planets beyond our solar system. And I got to do public engagement for that. So that means that I got to go to events and talk to people. I got to write, later in life, I got to write press releases about our robots. But I also got to work, I would help the Earth team with the NASA's climate website, which if you've never been to it, NASA has a climate website. It's really good. And doing that work is sort of the beginning of my interest in becoming a climate change journalist, because every day, one of the tasks I would do as an intern was to round up all the natural disasters that had happened around the world and then write a little bit about them and upload them to our app that would show what had happened that day.
Wow, that's fascinating and probably terrifying to see all of that data yourself, I would imagine. But, well, let me ask you, though, then, just about science, journalists communicating science. It's a huge problem. I talk with both journalists and scientists about this all the time. Scientists get, really frustrated that certain things aren't communicated the way that they should be. You were right there at the paradigm of those two things. Is that the right word? Between science and journalism and communicating to the public. So science in general, so we could talk about COVID forever, but when it comes to climate, like I think it's Yale and probably several other institutions that have a whole department that's dedicated to communicating climate science. So my question to you is, why is it so hard? What's the problem? What is the struggle to communicate these issues with people?
I think that one of the major roadblocks, having done both, I've communicated, science about the universe and I've communicated earth science, is that climate change has been politicized. And so now you're not just talking to people about science, which, I've experienced firsthand that people of all ages and even multiple languages get really excited about science when you explain it to them. So I think that the trouble with communicating things like COVID during the pandemic or climate change is that it has suddenly become an identity issue. So now you're not just pushing back against people's, lack of knowledge about facts, but now you're pushing against someone's story about who they are and how they understand the world.
Yes. So yeah, that's certainly got to be one reason for it. But I mean, when you're working at NASA and you write a press release and you send that out to every media outlet, I'm guessing that's how it works. And I feel like, and I'm just making this up off the top of my head, the issue becomes that not the organization and the scientist isn't the one that's the problem. The problem, well, in the end, it's the public because it's what we click on. But the media outlet decides whether or not they're going to take your press release and do anything with it. Are they going to mention it? And they're going to take into consideration, are people going to click on this? Are we going to make money off of this? Am I warm? Am I getting close to what you think might be the problem in terms of communicating climate from, I mean, we're talking about NASA. We're not talking about some smaller university or organization that's conducting science. We're talking about NASA. I would think when they get a press release, most people are going to pick up and print that. But my guess is even the New York Times, much less everybody else, has got to be, thinking about how they're going to communicate this and whether anybody's going to care enough to click. Is there any truth to that, do you think?
I've noticed, though, I went to NASA back in 2015. That's when I started working there. I've noticed since then that the state of newsrooms climate desks, many of them didn't even have a climate desk before. Now they have one. Most major newspapers do. And it seems to me that, this in the past might have been an issue of coverage, but I feel that as media has picked up the story of climate change, not just in the paper, but on social media and in movies, that it's, really entering a public consciousness more.
I could talk to you about NASA and all your work there forever. I'm sure you probably love to talk about it and maybe another time, but I want to try to get to a couple more things. Of course, your original reporting, you go to Atlantic Media, you work there. Then I think your next gig is where you're at now, Heated.
Yes.
And so my question to you is, I'm a huge fan of Emily's and her endeavor, the project, the outlet, Heated. And I just want you to tell us why someone as qualified and experienced as you would choose to go work with Emily at Heated.
The real question is how lucky I got that she chose me. I also was a fan of Heated, so I got the newsletter, which is how I knew she was looking for a reporter, because one day her newsletter said, I'm hiring. And I was so excited that I actually applied on vacation with 2 journalism friends. So I made them read my application to review it. So I had to thank them afterwards when I got the job. But yes, what's interesting is that I was interviewing with Emily in August, so last summer. And it was during those first interviews that I pitched the story we're about to talk about. So that was one of the reasons that I got hired, I think.
That's interesting. All right. Well, we can get to it, but just one more thing, just about Heated and independent media in general. I mean, why work there and not on one of the climate desks that you mentioned?
I think Heated's really special because we have the freedom to write about what we feel is important. When we do, Emily says we do accountability journalism, which we do. We don't have we're not beholden to any publishers or any advertisers. I'm not saying that the other climate desks have that issue, but it really gives you a complete freedom to have your own business, your own newsletter, and we can directly reach our readers.
I mean, you're not saying that, but I'll say it. Having worked in corporate media, even when you don't think or aren't told that there's a conflict about something, it's in the back of your head that if I say this or I report this, could there be any backlash? It exists, and it's not just about advertisers. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. When you've got this outfit that you guys now have, heated.world, that's not the case. So go subscribe and support Emily and Arielle doing really, really great work. So let's get to it. You're out in Southern California.
Yes.
And apparently, and I guess I didn't realize this, but I heard somebody say it recently. Sirens are to New York as helicopters are to Southern California, meaning you're always hearing them so much that you get used to it. Your piece is about the climate cost of Los Angeles's police choppers. But just to be clear, is there some truth to that? I mean, are you constantly hearing helicopters? You've lived out there how long?
Altogether, 8 years now, I think.
Wow. So is that a thing? Choppers everywhere?
Yes. So funny you should ask. I went to sleep to the sound of helicopters last night. And of course, it will depend a little bit on what neighborhood you're in. But everyone I spoke to this story went to sleep or woke up because of police helicopters overhead. So I haven't heard anyone say that sirens are to New York as helicopters are to LA, but it's very, very true. I did live in New York briefly, so I have to say yes.
I mean, and we're not saying that every helicopter obviously is a police helicopter. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of news or traffic outlets because of the nightmare that is Los Angeles traffic, which begs the question, and perhaps another time we can get into why anybody would possibly be able to live there because of all that traffic. That's what I think of when I think of LA. But luckily, I think you work from home, right? Hopefully. Oh my God, going into an office, commuting, like even 7 minutes is like or even 7 miles, like an hour.
I have commuted in LA, but yes, it is very nice to cut that out.
All right. So the climate cost of LA's police choppers. It's a really interesting piece that covers a lot of ground that I never thought about, which is the other thing that I really like about Heated. It's not obvious what you're going to cover or what you're going to write about. And if you think it's going to be when you read the headline, it becomes pretty clear it's not the case at all. You cover a lot here. Where did you come on the story? Obviously, you hear helicopters all the time. You mentioned Nicholas Shapiro's work here. He's a professor of biology and society at UCLA. Was it his work, or do people think a lot about those helicopters and how much waste they are?
We think about them a lot in LA because they're constantly overhead. But I have to say, I hadn't seen anyone or heard anyone talk about their emissions. The reason I got interested in it is because I was reading a lot last summer about climate celebrity jet emissions. So that was when it hit the news that Taylor Swift was, people said she was the number one climate emitter from her private jet, and they were calling Kylie Jenner a climate criminal. And at the same time, I could barely hear people over the sound of helicopters, which is very common. Like, it wasn't new for me, but it started me thinking, I wonder if anyone has ever looked into the emissions from these helicopters. They're constantly overhead. And so I went looking, and that is when I found like one very small thing about Nicholas Shapiro's work, and that he had looked into this. So I called him up in August of 2022, and he was very happy to talk to me.
So it's a massive, costly, and ineffective fleet. The LA helicopter fleet is the largest of any municipal law enforcement agency, in the world. Combined with LA County Sheriff's Department, which has the largest fleet of any sheriff's department in the country, LA police have 34 helicopters and 4 small aircraft at their disposal. And by the way, if you think of an argument for any argument, Arielle's got it covered in this piece. So talk to me a little bit about how it becomes a cost to the climate.
So you're right. The LAPD claims on their own website that they have the largest helicopter fleet in the world for a municipal government, which, if you think about that, that is a crazy claim, because you have to say, why? Why do you have this many? And then the Sheriff's Department, which does cover my area, has similarly the largest fleet in the nation. So over 1 year that Nick Shapiro tracked these helicopters from 2019 to 2020, the Sheriff's Department and the LAPD burned over 1.2 million gallons of fuel. So if you convert that, that releases 11,100 metric tons of CO2. So if you need a way to visualize 11,000 metric tons of CO2, you could drive your car around the Earth, around the equator, 873 times. And that would equal the amount of fuel that the helicopter fleet burned in 1 year.
I like it when you put it that way. I can visualize it, but it brings up an argument that you take on in the piece, which is, I think one of the police departments in their response said, listen, the helicopters cover a lot more ground, and without them, we would have to have so many more cars out there, which adds up to, if that's your concern, they didn't say that, I'm guessing they said that, more of a fuel cost. Not the case though, huh?
Yes. So they did say, the Sheriff's Department spoke with me, and they told me a little bit about how if they were doing a pursuit, say, so they're, one of those exciting, like police chases, exciting if you find it exciting on TV, not in real life. They said that one helicopter is roughly equivalent to 20 to 30 cars, right? Okay. So that's fine. And then the LAPD in their budget proposal, where they're asking for more money and for over $15 million to replace 2 of their helicopters with new ones. They also say there could be a climate case for this, because one helicopter is equivalent to, I think they say 4 black and whites. But if you do the math, which I did, one helicopter's fuel burn for 1 year is the same as 73 cars. So the math that they're using doesn't add up.
And we can go into more of the math and more of the data that you talk about there. But somebody might say, well, it's worth it because of all the crime that the helicopters stop the criming of, I'm guessing. You take a look at that?
Yes. So that's a very common point. And I think it's important to point out 2 things. One is that there have been, recent studies that are quite comprehensive that show that helicopters are not more effective at preventing crime. This idea that if you hear the sound of the helicopter patrolling, then it's deterrent doesn't turn out to be true. And the second point is that these helicopters are not policing everyone equally, as you might imagine. They are specifically policing, and this will be in the next piece, but Black and Indigenous neighborhoods in LA. So there's a long history of racist policing in the LAPD and the sheriff's office, and that still comes through in their aerial surveillance. Yeah,
you mentioned that apparently there's data tracking how police fly lower and more often over Black neighborhoods. I mean, I guess they can get away with that, and that's why they do it. I mean, I'm sure they'll have an argument for that, but I just can't imagine having to be afraid of helicopters.
And it's important to note, too, that these helicopters are just so loud that it's almost impossible to sleep through them. And they have searchlights, like very powerful searchlights. And so if you have them overhead, it's a quality of life issue in addition to surveillance. So it's not the same thing as, say, I've had people say, well, celebrity jets are worse because that's one person. Well, celebrity jets aren't being funded by you, the taxpayer, and they're not observing you and specifically policing people in your neighborhood, especially people of color.
Always a really important argument that people don't seem to understand about when we're paying for it. I mean, you're paying for the celebrity jets cost too, in many different ways, and we should make laws about that, but it's a different thing than any public government department, which is obviously what the police department is. This is a really important piece. It's really interesting work, and I think everybody should go read it. Of course, subscribe to Heated. And you're going to be coming out with a follow-up of this. Is that right?
Yes. So we wanted to give space to the part about how these helicopters are policing, neighborhoods in LA that have majority Black or Indigenous residents. So that will be our follow-up piece where you learn more about that.
I mean, so much of the cost of climate is disproportionately falls upon Black and brown communities across this country. And it seems like almost a trite thing for progressives and liberals to say, especially white people maybe. But the truth is the truth, that it's more of a cost. And obviously for more impoverished nations, we could argue as well, not necessarily equating skin color to poverty, obviously, but it's really important issue to be covering. What do you have to say about just the fact that it seems like every single dirty source of energy seems to be located near disproportionately either poor people or Black and brown people in America, especially?
That's purposeful. I mean, there's been a lot of work done by others who are environmental justice advocates who've shown that the placement of, say, your oil refinery or your, chemical plant, or in this case, your aerial police surveillance, is not a mistake. It's a legacy of this country's history with racism.
Arielle Samuelson, really, really great to talk to you for the first time here on Stand Up. And I hope people go subscribe to Heated, and we'll be talking to you hopefully for your next piece and whenever you want, because this is really important. And this is great. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, there she goes. Arielle Samuelson. Isn't she great? Smart. Very smart. Great voice. I liked editing that and even talking with her. She was really good. She hasn't done a lot of broadcasting, mostly works in print. So I was very encouraging of her. And so hopefully she will be back here and elsewhere, promote their work, subscribe to their work, heated.world. And I hope to hear more from Arielle Samuelson. But right now, it's time to get to my second guest of today's show. That's right. I've got two today. Sometimes I've got one. Sometimes I've got two. But I've got all the contacts. And if I don't, I'll get them and I'll get them on. Let me know who you want me to have on the program. Email me about that or anything. standupwithpete@gmail.com. But right now, it's time for constitutional law scholar from Georgia State University, the host of the best podcast on constitutional law, Supreme Myths, which is also the name of his first book. His last book is Originalism as Faith. You should get them and read them both. Follow him on Twitter, on TikTok, on Facebook, all of it. My good friend Eric Segall joins us to talk about corruption at the court and what we can do to change it, if ever. Let's do it with the legal eagle, Eric Segall.
There he is. It's the host of the Supreme Myths podcast. Huge hit in the legal community. Professor Eric Segall of Georgia State University. Look at you.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Good to see you again.
Who would have thought you'd be this major broadcaster?
Definitely not me, and I'm not, but the podcast seems to be going reasonably okay.
And how's the guest house going? Is that going good?
The guest house, we'll have pictures soon.
I think we should open it up to listeners, the audience of this show, to crowdsource the interior decoration.
I would like to point out something about the entire guest house scandal that is reflective of what I want people to know about my views on the Supreme Court. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
So, since 2010, you've accused me of having a guest house. This was a lie. I kept saying it was a lie. Despite your loyal audiences supporting you in this project, I've never had a guest house. It was a termite-infested, rat-infested, broken-down building that needed to go. But now that we have, in fact, removed that dilapidated disaster from our backyard and starting building a guest house, you will notice that I've not denied that I'm about to have a guest house. I've been denying for 10 years. You know why that is?
Why?
Because I say it like it is. And that's true for the Supreme Court as well. So when I tell people, sorry about this, the court is not a court, I want them to believe me. It is not.
Well done. The court is not a court, and the guest house is not a guest house.
But it will be soon.
Here's the headline that I reached out to you with rage over.
Yes. Yes, you were so mad. I really see
so
you.
Mad. So mad. Mad at you.
Wait, stop. Sorry. I want to digress. I want to digress to the very first time you ever called me. Can I do that? So, as most people know, I got on your show by calling in shortly after New Year's Eve in 2000 some year. I don't remember. And then I was a guest on the show a few times, just a couple times. And that's when you had your POTUS show. So it was, very national, all that. So I wake up one morning and I start doing my stuff and the day rolls on. And you never, all we had done was I'd been a guest twice through your producers. And I pick up my cell phone, and there you are. No producer, no screener, no, none of your many, many fine producers at POTUS. Just you. Segall! I don't understand. How can the court rule this? What do you mean? What do you mean corporations are people? What do you mean speech is money? What do you mean? The Citizens United decision, it's terrible. I need you to come on right now, and I can 20 minutes and talk about it. And I responded, who's this? And this is Pete Dominic. And you said, I'd like you to come on the show and talk about Citizens United. And I said, it came out a few minutes ago. And if you take the majority opinion and the concurring opinions and the dissenting opinions, it's about 150 pages long. And if anybody can tell you in the next 2 hours they can read these decisions, they're lying to you. What I will do is read it carefully this afternoon and come on your show tomorrow. And to my amazement, you said, that's a good idea. And I said, are you worried about not being first? Because I know in this business being first is everything. And you said, no, I would rather have a thorough, I can get your initial reactions to the headlines. That's fine. But I want you to do a thorough discussion of it. And I admit for that, you have to probably read it. and we talked the next day. And I was so impressed that you understood that idea. No, I'm not going to comment on 150 pages 10 minutes after it comes out. Right. I mean, that's, anyway, sorry.
And, well, that's why you're about to say you haven't gotten read in on the whole thing I'm outraged about today.
I'm ready to talk about the thing you're outraged today.
Okay, so here's the deal. This is why I called Segall earlier in a fit of rage. Because I saw all of these tweets and headlines about Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed to the Supreme Court by Donald Trump, right?
Correct.
Went to the same high school as Brett Kavanaugh, right?
Correct.
Any other fun facts you want to point out about?
Sure. His mother almost destroyed the EPA when she was the head of the EPA and had to resign in disgrace. She worked for Ronald Reagan. He is her son. He is trying to finish her work of destroying the EPA. The other thing is he fancies himself a Westerner, despite the fact that he went to the same private elite school that in D.C. that Kavanaugh went to. And his mother was the head of the EPA. But he's a Westerner.
Anything else?
He, in his book, said unmistakably stupid and demonstrably false things. For example, he said in the book that Dred Scott, the terrible decision where the court said that blacks couldn't be citizens and Congress could not end slavery in the territories a few years before the Civil War, he said that the problem with that case was that it was all about living constitutionalism, except Judge Taney spent like 3 pages talking about how their only job is to figure out what the framers thought in 80 years ago, not living constitutionalism. It was, in fact, originalism that Dred Scott was based on. After Gorsuch put that in his book, a lot of people repeated it, and it's become a talking point on the right that Dred Scott was a living constitutionalist case, when, in fact, Dred Scott was originalism all the way down.
Wow. All right. Well, that's a good setup for this. Neil Gorsuch has joined the Supreme Court ethics scandal party. Rolling Stone. MSNBC. Neil Gorsuch property deal adds scrutiny following Clarence Thomas scandal. CNN. Justice Neil Gorsuch's property sale to prominent lawyer raises more ethical questions. The Guardian. Law firm CEO with U.S. Supreme Court dealings bought property.
Those are terrible headlines.
Gorsuch.
Oh, my God. Those are bad.
Law firm head bought Gorsuch-owned property. Politico. And Fox News. Gorsuch has a huge dick. Huh. Wow.
You know what? I'm very confident he doesn't, but that's it.
All right. Well, those are bad headlines. And here's the thing. The detail would seem that just over a week after Judge Gorsuch was confirmed to the Supreme Court, he sold a property that he owned.
No, stop. See, that's already not true.
What's wrong with that?
I loved your face there.
Just over a week after his confirmation.
No, stop. Not true. Wait. It wasn't. Yes, he had an interest in property. My understanding was like 20 or 25%. I'm not sure which, with 2 other people. And we don't know how the property was sold, whether Gorsuch was involved in the sale. All we know is he had an investment in some property with 2 other people, and they sold that to a law firm partner who says he has never met Justice Gorsuch, doesn't know Justice Gorsuch, unlike the James Bond villain who has been subsidizing Justice Thomas's fanaticism and his wife's unpatriotism for the last 20 years. This guy doesn't know Gorsuch, has never met him, doesn't know him. So that's a big difference, first of all.
Just over a week after his confirmation, Gorsuch sold property to the head of a law firm that has had over 20.
Wait a minute. It's the wrong sentence.
That is had, would
Gorsuch
you let me finish? Let me finish. You're really annoying.
Can't believe you're making me defend Gorsuch.
You love Neil Gorsuch. You said that you and Neil Gorsuch have a best friend necklace. He has one half, you have yours says Gore and his says Such. Here's the deal. I'm going to read this and if you say I'm going to mute you, I'll cut your microphone.
You've never done that to me.
Just over a week after his confirmation,
not even with Sarah Palin.
Justice Gorsuch sold property to the head of a law firm that has over 20 cases with business before the Supreme Court since Gorsuch joined. That's Bloomberg reporting.
So what?
Oh, you keep interrupting me and saying I can't read a damn sentence. Like you're the editor, like you're Michael.
I gave you all the facts. Gorsuch was an investor in some real property. They had a hard time selling it. It is true that a week or so after his confirmation his appointment was announced, he was nominated. The property did sell to this rich law firm partner whose firm has business before the Supreme Court. We don't know if Gorsuch knew who the sale was going to. We don't know anything yet. Sorry. Now, we should know it. That's the bit. What you should be focusing on is not Neil Gorsuch today. Maybe later we'll focus on him. What we should be focusing on today. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes?
I was just going to say, I know who's going to be the first guest in your guest house. The Gorsuch family.
So all of these headlines, oh my goodness, it makes me so mad. It's kind of like my guest house thing. That's why I brought it up. I brought it up intentionally. We have to wade through the smoke, and judges all over this country, state and federal, hobnob, party with, and probably even do official things with law firm partners all the time. Now, maybe they shouldn't, but they do. The only issue here is if this partner had himself direct contact financially with Gorsuch, that, and then argued, and then had a case before Gorsuch. But the fact that his firm did doesn't matter. Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, where I worked, I mean, Ted Olson was the partner I worked for. Ted Olson ended up arguing Bush versus Gore in the Supreme Court. Ted Olson is incredibly close, was close to the Scalia family. Scalia's son worked for that firm. Scalia's son still works for that firm, I believe. I'm not sure about that, but I think so. My point, Pete, is that there are all kinds of interlocking relationships between lawyers and judges all over the country. I have them. I am close personal friends with numerous judges, not close. I have personal friendships, some of them somewhat close, with judges all over Atlanta. And you know, I mean, I don't know. I think the Gorsuch thing should be looked at as, why did he leave the space blank where it said who bought the property?
That's a good detail. When he's asked, you have to fill out a form, who bought the property, he left it blank.
He doesn't have to fill out a form, but he has voluntarily agreed to fill out the forms. That's the big problem. But leaving that aside, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he did know and didn't want the world to know, and he's an asshole. I don't know. This is a nothing burger. And it takes attention away from Thomas, and it takes attention away from the fact that there's no binding ethics code in the Supreme Court. And all of these issues I'm sorry that I'm lecturing, all of these issues take attention away from numerous other transparency issues with the Supreme Court that yours truly organized a conference around in 2016. The lunchtime of that conference was Dahlia Lithwick, Adam Liptak, and Robert Barnes, who was the Supreme Court reporter for the Washington Post. And that whole day, we talked about numerous transparency issues that are incredibly important. That's what we should be talking about. Can we talk about those for a minute?
The Constitution makes it virtually impossible to discipline or remove a corrupt Supreme Court justice. True or false? The Constitution makes it virtually impossible to discipline or remove a corrupt Supreme Court justice.
They can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. They cannot be removed for any other reason. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
The Supreme Court has resisted ethical reforms in the past. In
2011, I'm interrupting you. In 2011, the year when the Affordable Care Act case was on the agenda coming up, and I thought Kagan should recuse herself. Other people thought Thomas should recuse himself. Justice Roberts issued a year-end report. Can we talk about this year-end on this issue, on the issue of transparency, on the issue of gifts and recusal and binding ethics codes and all that?
Sure.
And what Justice Roberts said was, we're different. I'm paraphrasing. We're different than all the judges. We have different rules. Now, he said we have voluntarily agreed to comply with some of the rules, but that's an internal matter. That's not external.
Right.
Congress needs to change this, and only Congress can change this.
Just to reiterate what you just said, lower federal judges have to comply with a list of a code of conduct.
Well, okay, there's two different things, Pete, and we have to keep them separate.
But yet the 9 most powerful judges in the country.
You don't want any details. You just want headlines. It's not like you. That's not like you. Lower federal court judges are covered by the Judicial Conference's rules, but those rules are not mandatory. They're advisory. Congress has passed some laws that are mandatory on lower federal court judges involving gifts and recusal and some other things. And what Justice Roberts himself said in no uncertain terms in 2011 was, it is undecided whether Congress has the power to impose those rules on the Supreme Court. What he said, it's undecided. So that's the out they all have for saying they don't apply to us. But he said, we voluntarily agree to comply with the gifts part of that law. But again, that's as an internal matter. There's no external enforcement mechanism for that. And that's the problem. Pete, if a lower federal court judge does these kinds of things and then has to recuse himself or herself in a case and doesn't, what happens is the parties make a motion for recusal. It's denied. They appeal it to the Court of Appeals. They'll do whatever they do, and it could go to the Supreme Court. That's a decent process. There's no similar process for Supreme Court justices. When they're asked to recuse themselves from a case, or when they simply should recuse themselves from a case, there is no appeal, there is no procedure. It's up to each individual justice. And in the history of the United States, this is the most amazing stat. This is my stat of the day. In the history of the United States, I believe there have been only 4 written memos, 2 by Scalia, ever on the issue of recusal. In other words, they don't explain their decisions. Kagan never explained why she didn't recuse in the Affordable Care Act case, despite a motion to do so.
And you insisted she should.
And she absolutely had to recuse. There's no question. But she didn't. So what I'm here to tell you is Congress needs to say to the Supreme Court the following. You guys come up with a set of ethics rules that you're willing to be bound by, that you are saying if you violate them, there will be internal punishments or something like that. If you don't do that, we can't make you do that. Let's assume for sake of argument, separation of powers says they can't do that. I don't think that's true, but that's Roberts does. So let's say that. Okay. If you don't do a binding ethics code, you get 1/10 of your budget. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is your interpretation. I mean, Roberts says they can't do that.
No. Roberts said Congress can't mandate an ethics code. That's not the same. No, he said it's unsettled if they can or not. I think everybody would agree. Look, in 1801, Thomas Jefferson is elected president, kicks out John Adams, kicks out John Adams's Federalist Party. And you know what Jefferson and the Congress did? They closed the Supreme Court for a year. Literally, they closed it for a year. They said
for a year?
Yes. The entire 1801 term of the Supreme Court was canceled by Congress.
I had never heard that.
That's an amazing thing. So if you're an originalist, we know that Congress can cancel the Supreme Court. Now, I don't think Congress can cancel the Supreme Court. What I do think, they each have 4. Let's just take one budget item. They each get, I believe, 4 law clerks, 3 or 4 law clerks. Let's say they're making $50,000 a year. That's whatever that is, math, $2 million, whatever that is, over 9 justices, whatever it is. Congress could say, sorry,
right?
You get no money.
Congress holds the purse strings, and that's how they can force the Supreme Court to come up with its own code of ethics.
And by the way, it's a complicated story, so I don't want to get into it right now. But people should know when people talk about FDR's court packing plan and what happened out of that and everything else, there's a whole other side of that story about pensions and the rules involving Supreme Court pensions. And a lot of the reasons why Roosevelt went on radio and told the American people in 1936, the Supreme Court is made up of aged and infirm men. That was his exact line. Aged and infirm men. And he said, we have to save the country from the court and the Constitution from the court, was because the pension rules didn't incentivize the justices to retire. Congress can play with those too today. Congress could totally change the pension rules to effectively, financially make it much more likely that the judges will retire early if they want it, if Congress wanted to. The problem, of course, with all of this is the political will isn't there. And that's just shockingly unsatisfying. Sorry.
Going back to Gorsuch and transparency, I mean, I think something that's really important is Gorsuch isn't Clarence Thomas, and Clarence Thomas taking gifts and vacations and plane rides isn't selling his mom's property at no profit. Like, I think that we keep hearing a lot of different things about what is easily perceived, especially if it's your bias to hate a person, as a form of corruption. But in fact, it takes a lot of investigation and nuance in history, which is what you're always offering here and everywhere else. So when it comes to the specifics of these allegations around Gorsuch, much less Thomas or any other justice that's currently serving or has, what do you think we should be most concerned about? And you can be kind of hypothetical in terms of what might come before the court that should require them to recuse to what they can accept in terms of fee for service, speaking gigs, selling their mother's house, and shit like that.
So first of all, what do other countries and states do? Because why can't that just be the applicable rules for this court? There should be binding ethics rules on the Supreme Court that are enforceable by a third party. If they're not enforceable by a third party, they're probably not good. You know how we know that? Because the whole basis of the court's power is that the hen is not allowed. The wolf. What animal is it that watches the hen house? Fox. The fox is not. I'm not good with animals. The fox is not allowed to watch the hen house, which is why Congress does not get to be the final judge of the constitutional validity of its own laws, which is why the president doesn't get to have the final say over the constitutionality of the FBI's prosecutions. Whatever. None of this works, Pete, unless there's an external enforcer. And here's the problem. The Supreme Court's opinion, I think, is you can't have a third party enforcer because of separation of powers. But that argument's stupid. It's a dumb argument.
Why is that separation of power not applicable and equitable to what a state court does or what other countries' Supreme Courts do? And will a guinea pig be guarding your guest house?
I think we have 6 currently, 6 or 7.
That should keep it safe.
That should keep. All right. First of all, going back to Gorsuch, I want to mop something up here. The story came out today. We don't know all the facts. I am withholding judgment until I know the facts. The reason that's different than Justice Thomas is because Thomas has actually come out and said things about the James Bond villain who has supported he and his wife for 25 years. And he has not denied. He has not denied anything. He said,
Harlan Crow,
Thomas has not denied receiving those things. So let's be clear. No federal judge should have a billionaire sugar daddy. That's just a bad look. And let me remind people that the legal standard is not impropriety, but the appearance of impropriety, the appearance of it. And, it's one thing to have a birthday dinner. Scalia and Thomas went to Koch brothers retreats a couple times, and the media found it and they stopped. There have been isolated things like this. I know of no other situation where a Supreme Court justice had this magnitude of gifts lavished upon them by someone who obviously has a direct. See, the other difference here is Harlan Crow has political and economic interests that we all know come in front of the Supreme Court all the time. Not direct, but his interests, his politics. This partner in this law firm, we don't know. By the way, I did read the partner who bought this property voted for Hillary and is more of a Democrat than a Republican. And, so the idea there's some conspiracy between this guy who voted for Hillary and Gorsuch, I find extremely tenuous.
Is it unseemly? What is the insinuation that if a billionaire takes a Supreme Court justice on vacation, that Supreme Court justice is going to potentially decide cases in however that guy wants them? He's going to somehow influence.
It doesn't have to be that. Improper influence can give rise to the appearance of impropriety. Let me put it this way. So the reason I'm a little less, to me, this is not all tied to the recusal issue, because you and I both know that Justice Thomas is going to vote how Justice Thomas votes pretty much, come hell or high water, and he's going to vote in favor of the Republican Party, and it doesnment matter whether a billionaire is supporting him or not. But what is an interesting counterfactual, though, what is an interesting thought experiment, would be the justices like Justice Blackmun, who was appointed by Nixon, Justice White, appointed by Kennedy, Justice Stevens, appointed by Gerald Ford. These are all justices who were appointed by one political party and ended up, Justice Brennan was appointed by Eisenhower and ended up being having the politics of the other political party. And the question I want to know is if somehow 12 years ago or 15 years ago, or last week, Justice Thomas had an epiphany where he decided he's been wrong all these years. And in fact, affirmative action is constitutional and there should be a right to abortion. And no, speech isn't money. Money is not speech. And no, corporations don't have the same rights. They have some rights, not the same rights as individuals. Would Crow still take him on his yacht? If the answer is no, we have a big problem. And my guess is the answer is no.
Right. How about this? Can I ask you one more specific question? I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if you've ever followed this down, but we're talking about current Supreme Court justices and their conflicts of interest or their potential corruption allegations. And for a long, long time, people have been talking about Brett Kavanaugh's debts being paid off by somebody.
Yeah, I've researched that now.
Oh, you have now? Okay, because my understanding, according to Mother Jones, which is the most liberal magazine, is that that's a conspiracy theory that's not worth really.
Well, I read the exact article you're talking about.
You did? Okay, great.
That is how prepared I am for your show.
Oh, wow. I didn't tell you. Wow.
No,
okay, that's fantastic.
I read it a week ago for a different show. But anyway, sorry. Did you hear what I said? I don't think you
Can't believe you're doing other shows.
I know. It's hard. I wouldn't be if it wasn't for you. Mother Jones's position there was too strong. Here's what we know. He definitely had a lot of debt, and then he didn't. The best available evidence is his parents paid off the debt. That's the best available evidence.
His parents paid off the debt.
That's what Mother Jones says. That's what that article says. The problem is, I think, if that's true, just say it.
Yeah, that's what's going.
What's so? I mean,
well,
I come from a family of, not real money, but upper class wealth for sure. And my parents helped me with things like my first house and my second house, and I don't deny it. And why would I? And it's stupid. I love my parents; they're very generous to me. They're both gone. It'd be very easy for Kavanaugh to say, "Yeah, my parents paid that off." End of scandal. He's never said that. His parents have never said it. Mother Jones is guessing that's what happened. We're all guessing that's what happened. You're innocent until proven guilty, so I don't want to, but it would be a lot easier if he would just say something.
Yeah, well, you know why he's not saying something?
I don't know why he's not saying.
Because it's none of your business, and he's happy to piss liberals off.
It is his business. It is our business because he's a Supreme Court justice.
It's none of your business who paid off my debts.
It's absolutely our business.
It's the public's business who paid off the Supreme Court.
Any major. Well, okay. Let's back up a step, and this is. We kind of got lost in the thread here because
I think we've been right on top. I think, first of all, I think I've conducted a perfect interview.
Pete, the problem is not Gorsuch, and the problem is not Thomas, and the problem is not, for that matter, Elena Kagan. So your old listeners, not listeners who are old, your listeners who have been listening for a long time know this, but your new listeners may not. I went out on a very public limb in 2012, and I was the only liberal in the country who said Elena Kagan should recuse herself in the Affordable Care Act case. I did it in Slate. I did it in the LA Times. I did it in the Penn Law Review, debating Sherilyn Ifill, who's a wonderful person.
Oh, boy.
And I agree with 99.99999% of the time. We disagreed on this.
I didn't know you and now I think that you're wrong for the first time ever.
Well, she tweeted yesterday that she remembered that 2 days ago, that she was looking back at our debate in the Penn Law Review, and she said, and she's right, we covered a lot of ground, and she said, I can't believe we're still asking the same question. I think she has softened on my views about Kagan on that, but I'm not sure.
Interesting.
But my only point is, I'm a liberal progressive who I'd like to think approaches these issues from a nonpartisan point of view. Exhibit A, I thought Kagan should recuse in the Affordable Care Act case, which meant the case would have come out differently.
Yes.
And Obamacare would have been struck down. So with that amount of self-serving behind us, what I want to say is, as horrific as Thomas is, and everybody knows what I think of Justice Thomas, it's the court, stupid. That's the pun from It's the Money, Stupid. Who said it's the money, stupid? Somebody said that.
It's the economy, stupid.
It's the economy, stupid. It's the court. When you said other countries do this and other countries do this, no, you're right about that, 100%. All judges have ethical codes. No country in the history of the globe has had a judicial institution like our Supreme Court. Ever. Ever. We're the only one. What we ask I said this before on your show, I'm going to say it again. This is the judge's job. You have a job for life. That's wrong right away. You have unreviewable power unless they pass a constitutional amendment, which never happens. That's a problem. They're interpreting an ancient document written by white property males and nobody else.
How dare you on this show?
And they effectively have no constraint other than what they think the American people will accept. So
what they think the American people will accept.
Yeah, in other words, if they lose the confidence of the American people or the president, then that's that hasn't happened, and it's not likely to happen.
Based on that point, the American people, I'm going to make this argument, aren't accepting their ruling on abortion.
I agree. As I predicted to you.
And you, just to point out, you made this argument, we learned a lot. Justice Roberts on Obamacare arguably made his decision on what the American people would accept.
I agree with that.
And that your point is, accurate and relevant to that.
That's not a legal. My point, Pete, is that's not a legal constraint. That is a political.
I know. Conviction. No, I know, and I'm proving the point, but I'm also saying, generally speaking, what you're saying is that there are no guardrails and there's nothing policing the Supreme Court, but deciding on what the American people will accept,
right.
And
sure.
If that's the litmus test, or if that's the standard, then we could go back and look at a whole bunch of history and judgments, and it's probably mostly true what you're saying, right?
Well, I mean, let's go back.
Like loving. I can
do this in, I think, 3 minutes.
In three cases, can you do Loving versus Virginia? Because would the American people accept interracial marriage? Yeah, they would. Gay marriage? Yup.
Okay. Stop the start.
And just say marriage cases from now on. Thank you.
In 1801, Congress closed the Supreme Court. In 1857 or 58, the court said that Congress cannot end slavery in the territories and blacks can never be citizens, a decision that pretty much led to the Civil War.
So they didn't accept that one.
Between 1880 and 1900, the court completely rewrote the Reconstruction Amendments from protecting blacks to protecting railroads. Then from 1900 to 1936, the court struck down over 200 laws involving minimum wages, overtime rules, labor conditions, the rights of unions, because there was an anti-progressive court. And that went on for 35 years. Then Roosevelt goes on the radio and criticizes the court, announces his court packing plan. He's he's incredibly popular president. And from 1936 to about 1963 or so, Brown comes along. But other than Brown, the court doesn't do a whole lot of things. Then we have the Warren Court, which goes off the rails and creates basically the law and order backlash, allowing Nixon to run on that. And then we eventually get Roe, which to people who think abortion is murder, is the worst decision ever. Then we get to Citizens United, and we get to Shelby County, and we get to all the terrible cases. It's the institution that's broken, Pete. It's not, if you were on the Supreme Court and the issue of campaign finance reform came up, and you could could allow some regulations that are very strong to help get money out of elections. I know this is an issue deep to your heart. You would do it no matter what the law was, right? You have unreviewable power for life. Think about it. You have unreviewable power for life. Why would you care what some court said 10 years ago? The court doesn't take its own cases seriously. Why should we?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, footnote 48 in Dobbs, the Dobbs case, the abortion case, Justice Alito says in the text, we've reversed major cases before. And then he dropped, justifying reversing Roe in cases. And then he drops a footnote that is 2.5 pages, single spaced. A footnote, 2.5 pages, single spaced, of all the important cases. A partial list of the important cases the court has overturned in every litigated area of constitutional law. First, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, eighth, 10th, 11th, and 14th Amendments. The court has reversed itself over and over and over and over again, depending on who's on the court. And the reason for that is the cardinal rule of democracy. Never give a government official unreviewable power for life. Don't do that. How complicated is that? So you're making it, but what I was reacting to earlier was the comparison to other countries and ethics codes. It's all too complicated. In fact, everything about this is too complicated. What I have found, just keep thinking of this golden rule. In a democracy, we don't give government officials unreviewable power for life. We just don't, except the Supreme Court of the United States.
A democracy can't be a democracy if it gives that kind of power.
I think
it's antithetical to democracy.
I think that's largely true. Pete, the American people haven't voted on, I mean, we are now, but for 50 years, we didn't vote on abortion. Some states have voted on affirmative action, but only 10 out of 50 or so. We should be voting on these issues, not accepting the edicts from these Ivy League lawyers plus Barrett, because she's not an Ivy League lawyer, from above. We should not be doing that. Now, where there is a clear violation of the Constitution, clear violation, somebody wants to be president and they're 32 years old. I'm sorry, you can't be a president at 32. You can't. And if your opponent sues, the Supreme Court should say, sorry, it says 35. It's those kinds of cases the founding fathers thought would lead to the judicial review, not rewriting the law of virtually every social, political, cultural, and educational issue in America. I mean, is there a major American issue other than, the filibuster, the court has said, the court has never dealt with it. Lower courts have said, we're not touching the filibuster. I helped John Lewis when he was alive. I helped John Lewis file a lawsuit challenging the filibuster. And the Court of Appeals in D.C. said, can't do that, no standing, no this, no that. Other than the filibuster and the recognition of foreign countries, it's hard, which is up to the president alone. It's hard to imagine very many major issues the Supreme Court has not weighed in on, right? And that's just wrong. We didn't vote for them. We can't fire them. Justice Gorsuch knows no more about affirmative action or less about affirmative action than I do or you do. I mean, it's dumb. Sorry.
Before I let you go.
Yeah, sorry for the rant.
No, I like it. A lot of context there. I appreciate it very much. You're a convincing.
Focus on the court, not the people on the court. I've been trying to yell that. Pete, that's been my whole career.
I know. You've been very convincing to me and my audience, to be fair. I don't
like Thomas. It's true. But he's not the real problem. The real problem is the institution.
Right. The real problem is the institution. Should be the name of your new book. But I do want to ask you about the future of the abortion pill, or just medications. I mean, we could get specific about mifepristone and the 2-dose thing and the EPA and so on. But
well pronounced.
I worked on it, but I want to just.
Can you pronounce the Greek freak's name?
What?
Can you pronounce the Greek freak's name? Giannis.
No.
Okay.
I don't even know I don't know the words you said.
What? So, wait. Milwaukee Bucks. The two-time MVP, the center for the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis. I'm not going to pronounce his last name.
There's a professional basketball player whose name is difficult to pronounce. Yes. Moving on. So
I'm trying to lighten this up.
So I can't believe people are so obsessed with the NBA. Maybe I should.
Oh my God, these playoffs are amazing.
No, I should be. I'm happy for all those who are. It's great. It's a great game and it's fun.
Okay, just 1 second. You brought it up, not me.
No. So I can't. So here's the thing: the abortion pill, the future of the medication. What is the Supreme Court? Because what I'm hearing, the analysis I'm hearing is this is going to come up eventually before the Supreme Court.
It will. Yes. And almost sure. Unless so the case is now back in the Court of Appeals. Is there a world where the Court of Appeals says the plaintiffs lose? Yes, I think so. There is that world. But it's extremely unlikely.
They can't appeal that.
Then the government will appeal. Right? Now the case is stayed until either the government wins or the case gets back to the Supreme Court. So but here's the thing. There is no non-frivolous argument supporting the plaintiffs. Usually I say to you, reasonable people can disagree about most constitutional law questions and issues. This is not one of those times. And conservatives are saying that as well. All the people who don't like the this kind of thing.
Judicial activism.
Right. Now, here's the problem. This case is no less frivolous than Shelby County versus Holder.
Oh, wow.
So, in other words, what Justice Roberts did in Shelby County was so legally wrong, awful, bad faith, terrible, that he made up a principle that Congress is not allowed to treat different states differently. That's why they struck down the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act. You know, the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act only applied to like 11 states, and mostly southern states and a few others. He made up a principle that Congress is not allowed to treat one state differently than another, absent a very strong reason. That principle was rejected by the Supreme Court in 1966. Rejected. Just rejected. No such principle exists, the court said. He reversed that case without saying he was reversing that case. He quoted that case wrongly. This has all been documented by Justice Ginsburg in dissent in that case, but by me and others elsewhere. My point here, Pete, is I've yet to see a case worse than Shelby County. Shelby County's reasoning is as bad as reasoning gets. Huh. So what I do, and now I want to say something publicly that I've never said before. I have a scoop for you. Are you ready?
Oh.
On 3 different occasions, 3 incredibly famous people said to me, if the court does X, I will publicly say the court's not a court. Do you want to know who those 3 people are?
For sure.
The first one is Dahlia Lithwick, who said that before the Affordable Care Act case. She actually said she would eat my book publicly if the court held that the Affordable Care Act was not justified by the Commerce Clause. She said she would eat my book publicly. Now, the court did hold that the Affordable Care Act was not supported by the Commerce Clause, but they did uphold it as a tax. So Dahlia and I have been fighting ever since who won that bet. However, she was one holding away from saying the court's not a court. Linda Greenhouse said to me, famous Linda Greenhouse said, in the before the King versus Burwell case came out, that was the Affordable Care Act challenge that I wrote about in the Atlantic, that everyone on the right thought had merit and was incredibly frivolous. And Linda said, if the court rules for the plaintiffs in King versus Burwell, I will acknowledge the court is not a court. Luckily for us, the court didn't rule that way. And Alito and Scalia and Thomas dissented, I believe, but the majority. So that's the second time that happened. Third time was just this week when a very famous law professor at the University of Texas said, if the Supreme Court strikes down the abortion pill, I will come out and say, you've been right all these years, the court is not a court. What I want to say about all of that is all 3 of those cases that those people said if they came out a certain way, we would publicly come out and support your book. Shelby County is worse than all 3. It's worse than all 3. Shelby County is worse than all 3. So, and Bush versus Gore, frankly, is worse than all 3. And I can give you 10 other cases worse than all 3. So, this abortion pill thing, anything can happen, Pete.
Well, I bet you Dahlia and Linda and University of Texas professor would disagree that those cases are worse than.
No, I think Linda and Dahlia would agree that Shelby County is as bad as this.
Huh.
I would bet you did. But anyway, I raised all of that just to say there is so much resistance, even among the most famous Dahlia and Linda and this other guy, Sandy Levinson, who's even a bigger critic of the court than they are. They all are real court critics. They really are. And they're not, but they don't go all the way. And I've said this to all 3 of those people. We'll never make progress, ever. And Dahlia and Linda and Sandy, I don't mind saying this right to you. We will never make progress until we accept the court is not a court. It's a different body. So the rules we apply to judges shouldn't apply to them. We need a new set of rules to deal with this institution that is unique in world history. That sounds like an overstatement, Pete, but it's not. There are other legislators, there are other executives, there are other federalism systems like in Germany where they have local governments, but there is no other life-tenured Supreme Court that interprets an ancient document that is impossible to amend. Think about the power it gives them. They are the final interpreters of our most fundamental law written centuries ago, and their power is unreviewable unless the people pass a constitutional amendment, which we know is not going to happen. End of.
I'm going to share that clip with the people who you just called out, and I'm going to tell you right now.
I love all the people I just called out, all 3 of them.
I agree with them and not you.
You think the court is a court?
No, I don't know. I'm just being a dick.
Linda, Dahlia, and Sandy are 3 of the best Supreme Court reporters in the country. Sandy's a law professor, the other 2 are journalists. I love all 3 of them. I think if the court does end up ruling that this abortion pill is illegal, I think all three of them will come out and side with me. And the point I want to make to them and to your audience is that's just one case.
That's just one case, yeah.
We've had 50 cases like that. We have.
And I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me as always. And
I think we should do a thing where at the end of every show, I tell you how many guinea pigs I have in my house.
How many do you have?
I have no idea.
Oh.
Too many to count.
All right, there he goes. Eric Segall, everybody, and love him. Such a good friend of mine. I hope you'll go listen to Supreme Myths. Go subscribe to that. Go get his books. Follow him on TikTok and Twitter. Let him know that you heard him here on the program. And maybe I'll tell him to stop by the Hangout tonight because we're doing a Hangout. It's tonight, 8 p.m. I hope to see you there if you're a paid subscriber. If you're not, why aren't you? Email me and tell me why you're not right now, or sign up because that would make my day here at the end of April. You always lose a few subscribers because people's credit cards expire, so it's like scary and depressing because every subscriber matters. So please subscribe and check your credit card. And thanks so much for all of your support. You are the very best, which is why it's time to give you another inspiring quote to end the show on. Today's a poem, something very personal to me. Something very cheesy but inspiring. The Don't Quit poem. Do you know the Don't Quit poem? Have you ever heard this poem? Because I actually had this poem up on my wall. So cheesy. When I was a teenage boy, it was given to me by, and a bunch of others, by the former head coach of the Syracuse University lacrosse team. I would go to lacrosse camp there, and he would talk to us youngsters and scout us as well. Not me, but the players who were really good. But he was an inspirational guy. He was a philosopher of sorts. And this poem is kind of cheesy, but I don't know. It really spoke to me then. And because it was such a central document, an inspiring poem in my life, I thought, you know what? I'm going to record it and put it at the end of the show. All right. So it's called Don't Quit. So whether it's about something you really want, a relationship, a job, life, whatever it is, don't quit. Here it is. Wait, can I get some inspiring music with this as well? Maybe some Hans Zimmer? When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is strange with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a failure comes about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Success is failure, turned inside out, the silver tint in the clouds of doubt, and you never can tell just how close you are and may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem worst that you must not quit. I love that poem. I don't know. I always liked it. It meant a lot to me. So there you go. I don't know who wrote it. Whoever it is, thanks to that person. And thanks to you for listening to the show all the way through. You're a bumblebee in my eyes, that's for sure. I don't even know what that means. Oh, I love this Hans Zimmer. All right. John Carroll. That's how we end the show. Good luck. Take us away, brother.
The sirens teach you better stand up, stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge, let the weak flee. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think your driving wheels been leaking grease, boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.